Hello, everybody. Welcome. Come on in. Today, we're talking about sleep, literally one of my favorite things in the whole world. So I cannot wait to get started. I am joined today by LaKeisha, who just if you can pop your hand up to be asked to speak, you can join me. And in the meantime, I would love to know with your react button if you can hear me. Yes, all working. Excellent. Great. If you have been here before, and I can see some names here that I recognize, welcome back. And if this is your first time joining me on one of these LinkedIn Lives, welcome. Before I dive in and actually get to the meat of what we want to talk about today, which is why sleep is so important to prioritize as much as we possibly can, and why it can really have an impact on your burnout journey and recovery, I just want to give a little bit of housekeeping. So if you have done one of these before, you know the drill, bear with me. If you haven't, then this will make things a little bit clearer. You have a react button at the bottom of your screen, which allows you to send little emoji messages to us here as speakers, and please do use those throughout the session. I will talk to LaKeisha for probably about 15 minutes or so, asking her some questions so that we can hear about her journey and how sleep has been so important to her. And then at the end, I will open it up and you can come on and ask questions as well. You have a little raise hand button next to your React, which will then say, tell me that you have a question. We can bring you on and you will be able to ask anything that you like. I do record these sessions separately to LinkedIn so that people who have missed them are able to listen to them separately. So that's something that you just need to know. If you do come on and ask a question, your voice will appear on a recording, but your name will not be attached to it, except that we will use your name when we say hello. So before we get diving in, for people who don't know me, my name is Charlotte Rooney. I am an anti-burnout coach, and I am on a mission to make burnout a thing of the past, which is why I am having one of these wonderful conversations with people who have been through this journey so that we can all learn from their experience and pick up tips and tricks. Let me allow LaKeisha to introduce herself and hopefully not have to correct the pronunciation of her name, because I realize up until now we have only ever spoken in writing. So over to you.
Well, hi, Charlotte. Thank you so much for having me. You are pronouncing my name correctly, so thank you.
Hooray!
As you said, my name is LaKeisha Entsuah. I am a wife. I'm a mom of three. I'm an author, a speaker, and I am a well-being coach. And so much like you, my goal is to help working moms live the life that they want, get rid of the overwhelm and the exhaustion, to stress less and to sleep more.
I think there are many, many working moms, and give us a little sign if you agree, who would think that sleeping more was the holy grail. Certainly in those early years when your children are quite small. So give us a thumbs up or a sign if you agree. Yes, thank you, Eleanor. I know that it has definitely been on your mind too, Jennifer, Andrea, and Florentine as well. Brilliant. So my understanding, LaKeisha, is that you have been on a bit of a journey through this yourself, that you have had some feelings of burnout and recovered. Would you be happy to share a little bit of that story with us?
Sure. So my burnout story starts in the summer of 2020, which I'm sure a lot of people listening are probably shaking their heads saying, yep, so did mine. In the midst of the pandemonium, as I like to refer to it. But I have, like I said, I have three children, and so they are now 9, and I have 4-year-old twins. And so in the summer of 2020, my twins were 2, and my 9-year-old was 7. So I was homeschooling like a lot of parents. In the midst of the pandemic, we lost the nanny that we had. And my husband travels for work. And so he was not home. He still had to go to work. He works in the pharmaceutical industry, so he was considered an essential employee. He had to go to work. And so it was me and my 3 kiddos at home. And at the time, I also ran a skincare brand. We were a small batch handmade skincare brand. And for my business, the summer of 2020 was very successful. For me personally, however, it was not. So trying to run the business, trying to take care of my kids, trying not to succumb to the anxiety of just living in the world that we were living in at that time, I was exhausted and
Mm,
I was literally burning at both ends of the candle. So it was lots of waking up very early in the morning, trying to get a whole lot of things done before the kids woke up, and then staying up very late at night, trying to get the things that I hadn't gotten to yet done before I finally literally fell into bed each night. And this cycle continued for many, many months until I literally reached a point where I was like, I can't even think straight anymore. I don't even know if I'm making good parenting decisions. I don't know if I'm making good business decisions because my brain and my body was just so overwhelmed. And that's when I knew I think I'm burnt out and I think it's time for me to do something different.
I really can empathize with that situation. I'm so sorry that it's an experience that you had to have, but it's one that I think a lot of us can relate to. Um, it's amazing how we so easily fall into that. Well, I'll just get up earlier, I'll just stay up later, I can work around this other thing. And we sort of don't
Mm-hmm.
draw that connection that actually sleep is so fundamental to our cognitive performance that you do get to exactly what you were just saying. You don't know anymore whether you're making the right decisions. And that exhaustion is really likely to make you less effective, less efficient at all of the things that you're doing. And then you end up having to stay up later to do the things because they're taking longer, and the whole thing kind of
Mm-hmm.
spirals. So
Exactly. And that's kind of where I found myself. It was like trying to get something done. I can't think straight. Okay, so I'm gonna put this down and I'll come back to it later. And then later becomes 10 p.m., 11 p.m., midnight, because you just cannot work up the mental energy to get through it.
yeah, 100%. So you realized that you were burnt out. This was not sustainable. You couldn't keep doing this anymore. Then what? I mean, what did you do to try to fix the problem?
So I had to really reprioritize. And so for me, unfortunately, that meant doing what I thought was taking a break from my business. And so, my kids are my kids. They needed me. And so kind of pushing them to the side wasn't an option.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to readjust what my priorities were. Thankfully for me, my family was in a situation where I could stop working and
Mm-hmm.
it wouldn't affect us dramatically. Um, and so I said, okay, well, I'm going to take a break from my business. I'm going to kind of scale back. We'll sell through this inventory and then, we'll take a break and I'll gather myself together. So at least taking that off my plate allowed me some time to say, okay, now I don't have to stay up trying to fill orders and things like that. I can actually go to sleep. And then it was rearranging what was happening on our day to day. So at this point, we're in 2021. My oldest child was back in school. My two younger children were also in playgroup a couple of days a week. And so it was like, okay, what can I rearrange in my life? What can I take off my plate? What can I delegate to other people? So I became a big fan of outsourcing. And I know as professionals, as business owners, we talk a lot about outsourcing our daily tasks, for work purposes. But I like to outsource home tasks, cleaning, grocery shopping, whatever it is that you can have somebody else handle for you. And so I started to look at the list of things that what can I take off my plate so I don't have to do. I'm one of those people who doesn't particularly enjoy cleaning the house, especially not when you have three young children who are always making a mess. And so it became simple things like that. Okay, can we hire a housekeeper to come in, every so often to kind of help out on those things? And really sitting down and saying, what are the things that I absolutely have to do? Let me dedicate my time and mental energy to that. And what are the things that I can push to the side and come back to at a later date when I'm feeling more like myself? At one point, that even included some social activities. So right around the time the rest of the world was like, okay, I think it's safe to at least come outside now. I was like, I think I'm going to stay inside a little longer. I'm not ready for people yet. I still need some more downtime as I try to recover. And so that meant not really going back out and being with people too much, because that required more energy than I had. And so really it was just about looking at what my responsibilities were and how I could make adjustments on the things that actually required my attention so that I could focus the little energy that I had on that and then get rid of everything else.
Mm. Yeah, those are some wonderfully practical tips. Curious if anyone listening is resonating with any of those, feeling like they could do with maybe reprioritizing what they are spending their energy on right now, or possibly contemplate the idea of outsourcing some of the work they do, maybe to a partner, or as you say, if they have that availability to potentially bring somebody in to help out. I remember as a teenager, I lived with my aunt and she had a cleaner my whole life. And I thought that was just horrendously decadent. And I told her so because obviously I was a charmer. And she just looked at me and said, do you know what? I hate cleaning. I don't want to spend 3 hours a week cleaning. I want to spend that time with my children and on my business. And so I am paying somebody else to do it who does it better. And it just really made me sort of, pull up and think of myself, okay, hang on a minute, get off your teenage high horse here and, and think realistically about that, about the way that you like to spend your energy. So let's go to sleep then, because, you kind of got some practical sides of your waking life that you've discussed there. And I am curious about, how did this affect your sleep? Did you find that once you had changed all of those things, you were just easily able to get back into a restful, 7-8 hours a night of blissful sleep? What was that like?
I wish that was the case, but unfortunately, it was not that simple. So for me, stress equals insomnia.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the midst of my burnout, there were a lot of sleepless nights, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, hoping to fall asleep, even though I was beyond exhausted, or waking up 2 and 3 times in the middle of the night because my mind was racing at all the things that I hadn't gotten to yet. And so the thought would be that, yeah, if I am, reprioritizing my life and I've gotten some things off of my to-do list, then magically those racing thoughts will go away and I'll be able to get restful sleep. And unfortunately, that wasn't the case. So I had to develop a system of winding my mind and my body down to prepare for sleep. And so what that looked like for me was, people talk about a nighttime routine. And sometimes we say, oh, I might take a bath or a shower. I might read a book and then I'll slip into bed. Some people like to watch the news or anything like that. For me, it became a system of getting all of the things that were happening in my brain to kind of turn off. And
Mm-hmm.
so that included um, some intentional journaling with asking myself a few questions, for how my day went. What went really well during the day? Because I found myself oftentimes kind of dwelling on the things that I either didn't do or the things that went horribly wrong for the day. So I
Mm-hmm.
had to kind of review that. What went well today? What am I so excited about for today? And they were usually really small wins, like, hey, I got all the laundry put away finally, kudos to me. And then kind of doing a brain dump. So literally just writing words on paper, no rhyme, no reason, just getting the thoughts out of my head. And then after that, I would spend some time meditating, a little light stretching, and then making sure that the room that I was in, my bedroom, was perfectly suited for sleep. So for me, that means it has to be very dark and it has to be very quiet. So I started using earplugs to block out any type of white noise. I started using a sleep mask to block out any ambient light. Moving my cell phone away from my nightstand. So it was really those small things that I had to start implementing to let my brain know we're getting ready to go to sleep. Because I think when we're exhausted, we kind of just fall into bed and our brain and our bodies had no time to prepare. And they're like, oh, wait, it's time to go to bed. But we were just running at 1,000 miles an hour. You can't bring a car to a screeching halt. when it's been running at 1,000 miles an hour. It has to come to a slow, gradual stop. And so I find that our brains and our bodies kind of need the same preparation for bed, especially if you've been struggling with your sleep. So it was about creating this kind of system to wind my brain and my body down to prepare myself for sleep.
I love that you bring in both elements there of the brain and the body, kind of remembering that sleep does, I mean, it's both parts, right? You know, our animal body also needs to be in a state of relaxation. And that's where maybe the meditation or the deep breathing or the light stretching can come in. And then we also need that part of the mental part of calming those racing thoughts, where the journaling can help, and reflecting on things that have gone well can help. And then, I mean, there's also the piece that you mentioned, which is just kind of around that sleep hygiene of, we also need to signal to the chemical systems in our body that it is nighttime, that it is winding down time, and that we're ready to go to sleep. Give me a thumbs up if you're listening and you find going to sleep every night a bit of a challenge, and that you think that some of these things could possibly be helpful to you. Oh, yes, I see Samantha and Yanya are joining me there on some of those elements. I know that for me, it is definitely needs to be really dark. The other thing that I quite like, I have one of those sunset and sunrise lamps. So then I can set it to almost like do an artificial sunset for me, which helps to signal to my body as well that it's time to sleep. So just before we open up and let anybody ask any questions that they have, I am curious, what would be the biggest piece of advice that you have for anybody who might find themselves in that kind of a situation?
So I think the first thing would be acknowledgement. Right. So, particularly for the women listening, I think men sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes they do pretty good at saying, nope, this is not working for me. I don't like it. It's not working for me. I need to do something different. I think we as women sometimes, however, have a harder time admitting when things aren't working for us. And especially because we're trying to hold everybody else together, that we kind of push ourselves to the bottom of the list and say, I'll get to it, I'll get to it, I'll get to it. And so the first thing I would really say is just acknowledge it. Say it's not working. Even if you don't know where to start to fix it, just say, hey, this isn't working. Say it out loud. It's not working. I think once you're able to admit it to yourself out loud, then you can really begin to formulate a path forward. And then, despite everything else that's going on around you, even if the rest of your world is chaos, start with getting more sleep. Right? Look and see, are you getting enough rest? If you're not getting enough rest, start there. However, you have to start there, even if it becomes a hard stop on your to-do list, but just start with getting more sleep. I think when we wake up rested, like we mentioned before, you're better able to start getting through the weeds, figuring out a plan, figuring out how you're going to get the rest of your life together. But you're not going to be able to do that if your brain is exhausted. So just start with sleep, and then the rest of it you'll be able to work out.
I think that's great advice. Okay, we have a little bit more than 10 minutes. So if you have a question that you would like to ask, or a comment that you'd like to weigh in, maybe you violently disagree with everything that has been said up until now and you wish to set us straight, find your little raise hand button at the bottom, pop up your hand, and you can join us up here and do any of those things. Although, you know, if we can keep things polite as possible, that would be great. Well, it appears as though you have been so thoroughly comprehensive and easy to follow that there are no queries at all. So let me ask you something again, just on my mind. And you haven't mentioned during this story kind of reaching out to other people for help. And I am curious whether you did this all alone, or did you have outside support from anywhere?
So I did have to reach out to my family in some instances, but it is not something that I did in the very beginning. And so, with the exception of having conversations with my husband, because especially at the point that I decided to take a break from my business, that's a decision that affects the entire family. So we had to discuss that. That it wasn't really something that I kind of reached out to others. I will say though that I also did start therapy in that
Mm-hmm.
process, and I think that's very important. So after I was able to kind of get through some of the logistical things of rearranging my schedule, I did start therapy because, again, like I said, it wasn't just the day-to-day things that I was dealing with. It was also the stress and the anxieties of life in the world around me and how
Mm-hmm.
that was affecting me as well. So I did seek professional help in that instance to kind of help me continue to work through some of those things.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Samantha, you have a question or comment. So yeah, take yourself off mute and go ahead.
Sorry, I had missed half of the beginning of the live stream or the audio, but just on the bits that I have heard, I can relate. Once you acknowledge that there is a problem or that you have or you going through burnout, it's the first step to recovery. I actually acknowledged not too long ago the same thing, and everything starts to change for you. It's that first step of acknowledgement that there's a problem. And even as women, as you guys have mentioned as well, we tend to take everything on ourselves and we don't always want to acknowledge that we need help. It's okay to ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with it. And that is, I think it's a mindset thing as well. We always want to show that we're stronger, but you can only be strong for so long without breaking. And sometimes it's good to break. That means you reset everything and you reevaluate everything and your journey completely changes. You become better for it. That's my experience. It's not everybody else's, but that's how I see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I mean, it's very true. It's sort of goes against a lot of what we've been taught around, being individually strong and taking responsibility for ourselves to admit that there's a problem and that we need help. And I agree with you. I think that, if you do go through a bit of a break, it can turn out to be a really positive thing once you've gotten through it. But I think all of us would potentially acknowledge that, well, maybe we wouldn't. I would say I would have preferred not to have broken personally, but some people may feel differently about that. And I think it's really important for each individual to do the thing that is right for them.
Yeah, and I would like to add that I think that a lot of what Samantha said is right, but I would have to agree with you, Charlotte. I would have preferred not to have broken. And I think that's why it's so important for us to be reinforcing ourselves on a regular basis. And so that's a lot of what I try to share with people is the art of reinforcing yourself on a regular basis. Life happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's absolutely nothing we can do about that. But I think that if we're reinforcing ourselves on a regular basis, we're better equipped to adjust when life happens and it doesn't kind of blindside us as much. It might not take us completely out. It might just slow us down a little bit. So I think that's where the importance of understanding that you do have to reinforce yourself regularly so that you can handle whatever life throws at you.
I love that. Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us and sharing, Samantha. I don't see any other hands raised right now. So, LaKeisha, why don't you tell people how can they find you? How can they follow you? How can they potentially work with you if that's what they're looking for?
Of course. So since we're on LinkedIn, you can find me right here on LinkedIn. You can find me on my website. It is wellbeautylab.com. The link is right on my LinkedIn profile. And if you are saying to yourself, if you're saying to yourself that I just need more sleep and I need a better system for falling asleep, head to my website. There are resources there. There is an entire sleep journal there to help you start on a better sleep journey. But if you need a little more one-on-one help, you can head to the Work With Me page on my website. It'll give you an idea of the services that I offer, and then we can chat about how I can help you on your journey to creating the life you want.
Fantastic. Thank you. And yeah, for everyone else, if you feel as though you need, you're maybe not a mom, not a working mom, which is the people that LaKeisha really knows how to support, or you'd like, support around burnout, which doesn't focus especially on sleep, you can find resources on my website as well. That is halfmanagedmind.com. And you can find me here on LinkedIn. I love being on LinkedIn, so pop me a message if you have any questions at all about anything, or if you have a topic that you would like to hear discussed on one of these LinkedIn audios in the future. So from there, thank you so much for joining me, everybody who is listening, and thank you, LaKeisha, for making the time to talk to us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Charlotte. It was my pleasure.
And I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of their day wherever they are, and hopefully some extra sleep this evening. Have a good one, everyone.